Welcome, everyone. I'm so glad you could join us for tonight's Tech Topics. My name is Lisa. I'm with the Tampa Hillsborough County Public Library, and I'm joined today by my good friend Shannon, who's going to be helping me keep track of your questions as they come in during the program. So, hi, Shannon. Thanks for helping us out tonight. Our tech topic today's tech topic, we're going to be talking about desktop cutting machines. So that's an awful long way of saying a machine name that you might know better by the brand name. So we're talking about Cricut or Cameo or Silhouette, that type of device, a desktop cutting machine. So let's jump right in with what that is. We're going to be covering today what they are, so kind of what the devices are, what they do, how they function, how they work, what the different parts of them are that you might not be familiar with, and then some features to look for if you're maybe looking to buy one or borrow one so that you can get the right kind of tool to do the project that you want to work on. So to get started with a little bit more information on what they are, the very basic explanation is that they are a machine that's going to take a design, an image or a graphic picture, and it's going to either cut or engrave it into whatever material that you're going to be using. So in a lot of cases, it'll be vinyl or paper, that kind of thing. But some of the machines can handle something a little bit tougher, like some of them can engrave into metal or cut even into balsa wood. So it's going to depend on the type of machines that you have as to what kind of materials you can cut. But that's the basics of it. It's going to take a picture or an image, and it's going to cut that out of your material. So some of the common materials that you're going to see, we've already talked about. You're going to have paper and cardstock, usually a heavier paper for making greeting cards, maybe scrapbooking, cutting out designs. But typically it's going to be something heavier weight. You wouldn't be able to use like a tissue paper, for example, because whatever material you're using needs to be able to stick to a sticky pad that runs through that machine. And if it's too light of a material, it's just going to tear on you. You might use it for cutting out fabric or cutting out the pattern. So if you're sewing, some of the machines can cut out fabric if they have a stabilizer backing attached to them, but some of them can actually cut out fabric without that stabilizer. Again, that's something that's going to depend on the machine. But yeah, you can either cut out actual pieces of your pattern or cut out the paper pattern for then tracing onto your fabric. Most commonly, I think you'll see these used to cut out vinyl decals that people use to personalize water bottles and mugs and things like that. Maybe some of the fun stickers you see on the backs of cars with images and graphics. So that's a very common use form, or even for t-shirts, using that heat transfer to put your design on a t-shirt, family reunions, things like that. So options are pretty wide open in terms of what you're going to cut and how you use it. So a good way to get started on that is if you don't already have one, if you're not already familiar with it, is probably going to be taking some classes and getting your ideas and inspiration that way for them. So a little bit more nitty-gritty information on how these cutters work. So you're going to take an image, and with the images that we're talking about, the higher resolution, the better. You're going to have that saved on your computer, and then you'll import it into whatever software your device uses. So each of these desktop cutters, the brand will have its own software that it uses to convert that image into a file that their machine can cut. Those are almost always free downloads from whatever brand your machine is, and it'll be a basic version of the software. Some of the brands will have upgrades that you can buy for more features on that software, but all of them will have at least the basic software available free. Also a good way to get started before you even cut anything, if you're trying to decide between brands, maybe try downloading that software first and see which of those software options are easier for you to use. That can be a great way to decide if you're not sure which model you would like to go with, which brand you would like to go with. Download their free software, see which one's easier for you to use. They're all very comparable. They work very, very similar to each other. So it's really going to be a personal preference which one's going to work best for you. So once you have your design and you've got it pulled into the software, you're going to send that to the printer. A lot of them will have a USB connection where you can plug it into your computer, or where you can save the file to a USB stick and print it from your device that way. So a lot of the newer ones, though, will have Wi-Fi or Bluetooth built in, so you don't even have to have your computer next to the cutting device. You can just beam it over and send that file for cutting. All right, we're going to look a little bit more at the file types, the image types, a little bit later in this session, but keep in mind as you're working on your files that when you trace your shapes and your outlines, anything that's not connected, that's free floating, is going to fall right off. So make sure that you have those images welded if you have free floating parts in the middle of your design. So a couple of key features to look for with these devices. So if you're looking to buy one instead of borrow one, the biggest difference that you're going to see is either the machine size or the material compatibility. Those are going to be your big deciding factors. So for all of the machines, pretty much they can take as long of a piece of material as you want, or as you have a cutting mat that can go through the machine. The problem that you will run into in terms of size is that the machines come in different widths. So some of them are 18, 24 plus however many inches. That's the widest that you can go through. So if you think you're going to be cutting very large designs that might need to be long and wide at the same time, you might look into getting one of the higher end machines that can take that larger material in. But for the most part, for most folks at home, whatever the base model of the brand that you're looking at is, those are typically going to be wide enough. Those will be anywhere from right around 12 to 18 inches that they can take in terms of width for that cutting surface. So for most folks, that's going to be plenty for putting decals on things or tracing out graphics for t-shirts and that sort of thing. So width is the important deciding factor there. Length, that can go indefinitely for most of them. The other big difference is your material compatibility in terms of how heavy of a material can they cut. So a lot of the newer silhouette cameos can cut pretty hefty stuff like balsa wood. You just have to buy the special cutting blades for it. So the standard cutting blades that most of these come with can cut your vinyl, your paper, anything that's thinner like that. For thicker materials, for your really heavy cardstock or cardboard, or even your balsa wood, they have what they call craft knives. And that's just going to be kind of like an X-Acto knife instead of that little pinpoint blade that you get in your normal desktop cutting blades. If you're cutting fabric, they also have a rotary wheeled blade that you can buy and use in your cutter. And it just pops in just like the regular blade does. On your end, it works pretty much exactly the same. The big difference is just getting the right blade for it and then having the right cutting mat for it. So if it's something that if you're using a cutting mat for it, they do have different levels of stickiness depending on what you're going to be cutting and how delicate it is. So if it's a very delicate material, you wouldn't want to use a super sticky cutting mat because then it would likely tear when you're pulling it back off. So just match that up, match the right tools for the right job. With all of these brands, you can find that information really easily on their websites. I looked at all the major brands and they all have really clear guidelines in terms of what material should be cut with which one of their machines and with which blades that would work best. So whichever model you decide to use, just pop over to their website if you're not sure, and they have those handy guides for the right accessories and materials for your project. Here's a quick overview of the desktop cutters that the library has. So not every branch, but most branches have some model of Silhouette desktop cutters. So it might not be the same model at every branch, but they usually have some available. And those are going to be primarily used in classes. So when the technology classes come up on the branch schedule, keep an eye on those. You'll see different projects. And what you'll see is when you register for that class, it'll generally be for a specific project that you sign up for. And they'll give you a great overview of the device, and they'll kind of walk you step by step through the project. And at the end of it, you'll have a finished thing to walk away with. So that's a really great way to get that hands-on practice in using those devices. Now, I said most of them have the Silhouette cutters, different models, years of those. There are a few branches that also have the Cricut machines. So if you're more familiar with that brand, there are a few branches that might have those instead of the Silhouette machines. That's definitely going to vary from branch to branch. So if there's a specific one that you're wanting to use, just kind of keep an eye out on the schedule and check those out. Now, if you want to get some more nitty-gritty training on how to use these devices and maybe using them for a small business, there are some classes that you can do online through the library, through LinkedIn Learning. I've got the name of one of the classes pulled up there. It's called Making 3D Presentation Materials and Mockups. So it's a class that's going to give you ideas and step-by-steps on how to make those little presentation materials. So if you've got a new product coming out and maybe you need to make a fitting packaging for it or whatever, it's going to walk you through how to kind of go about planning and making that with one of these devices. There we go. And we're going to real quick go over the images. All of these devices across the board can pretty much take any image file type. Some of these files are going to be a lot easier to use and to get a really nice end product out of. Anything graphic that we do like this, where we're sending it to a device, your vector files, your SVG files are going to be the best. That's going to give you the cleanest lines, and it's going to be the easiest to make that image bigger or smaller without having it look weird and blurry. With the desktop cutters, what you're doing is you're tracing an outline of an image or a silhouette of the image. And if it's not a high quality picture, you see the image on the left there, it's got a lot of the little pixelation. Well, when you're cutting that file, each one of those pixels is going to be a little zigzag. So you end up with a little bit of a jagged edge on the final product. Whereas with vector files or SVG files, you get that smooth edge no matter how big the picture gets. So SVGs are going to be the cleanest file type to use, especially if you're making something bigger or something that's really finely detailed. But your next best bet is going to be PNG files. The PNG files are actually really nice if you import those into your Silhouette Design Studio. When you're making that cut file, will automatically trace that image for you. It lets you basically skip a step in the process. So PNG files are pretty great, with that grain of salt that you want a nice large file. So the larger the file is, the larger the image is, the cleaner those lines are going to be. There's a little bit bigger version of that picture there, just to kind of show you the difference in how those edges turn out between those two file types. So here's kind of a screenshot of what it looks like in the Silhouette Studio when those images get pulled in. So you see you've got those red lines. That's what it's going to be tracing out for you. So it took that, it took a regular picture, it traced the outline of it, and it just left us those red lines, and that's what it's going to cut. So we love our hands-on technology in the library, and a lot of libraries have some really great maker spaces. We call them the Hive. There are library maker spaces where you can get some hands-on experience with devices like these desktop cutting machines, but also some of them will even have things like the laser cutters where you can cut out and engrave and laser etch into things like wood and other materials. Sewing machines, recording studios, so many fun things that you can learn and explore and get that hands-on experience with in our maker spaces. So especially for the larger ones and for some of this more complicated machinery, you're definitely going to need to do an orientation if you're wanting to use it outside of a specific class project setting. So if you just check the calendar for those locations and just type in orientation, that's going to pull up when they have those sessions for their maker spaces. So you just go to hcplc.org/events, pull up the location that you're wanting to go to, and just do a search for orientation, and it'll let you know when the next session is going to be. And letting you know, we have a new series coming up where we're going to be doing a spotlight on some more of our digital resources that we have. So I briefly mentioned that you could get some online classes that get the most out of using these tools and learn more of the nitty-gritty and the technical background of some of these things, and maybe get a more professional level overview of them. So that's one of the types of resources that we're going to be spotlighting in the future. We'll highlight different educational resources like that where you can do classes and things like our New York Times online services, the various options that are there. We'll have those at hcplc.org/events, and just do a quick search for Spotlight, and that'll pull those up coming up as well. So we have two fun ones coming up in January of this year. We're going to be doing a spotlight on the New York Times games. And then later in the month, we're spotlighting New York Times cooking. And we'll have some Mexican hot chocolate to go along with that. So keep an eye out for those. We hope you can join us for those. And that brings us to our Q&A. So Ms. Shannon, if you want to pop on, we can chat about the questions. Maybe you thought of something as we were talking.
Well, you know what, Lisa, I was wondering, could we just make sure that everybody knows that there will be updates on the classes and programs provided?
Yes. So the hcplc.org/events has our most current upcoming classes. So those are always up to date, usually for the upcoming month or two. Before we started today, I just did a really quick little project while I was waiting to get started. So the example picture that I showed you, the little example picture that I showed you, this is that design with the red lines.
That is really cool. And how do they find out where these services are available at which branches? What do they need to do?
So for the maker spaces, they'll want to go to hcplc.org/hive. That's going to have all of our makerspace related information on there. If they're kind of trying to figure out which location has which type of devices. We have recording studios at some of our locations, but not all of them. So if you go to the Hive, hcplc.org/hive, that's going to have a lot more detailed information, location by location, to get them that information and get started.
And we do encourage people to sign up prior, because you might not always be able to pop into a branch that offers these services and get right in, right?
Yep, that's a really good point. So yes, especially for the hands-on classes, we have to buy the material ahead of time. We have to plan and make sure that we have, enough devices out for the people that are signed up. So since we have to have so much ready in advance, we generally will have those by registration. So they'll want to sign up for those in advance, for those maker classes, those hands-on classes. And then the same goes for the orientation. Those orientation classes do fill up pretty quickly, especially for the recording studios. The recording studios, it's actually required to do that orientation before you can book your time. So once you've done your orientation, you can book your studio time in the recording studios, but only after you've gone through that orientation. So yep, very good questions.
And if a particular studio is booked that you want to use or usually use, you can always use one of the 3 other studios, right?
Yep, so you'll just want to reach out to that other location, say, hey, I've gone through the orientation at this other library branch. Can I get into your studio instead? Do you have an opening? The other thing to keep in mind is that you can book your studio space ahead of time, but if you're willing to risk it, they will take you in for a walk-in after you've done your orientation on a walk-in basis. So if maybe you weren't able to get a booking for whatever reason, it was already booked up, if you're willing to wait or show up at the branch and see if maybe there was a no-show, you could get some time in there instead. Just wouldn't be able to plan it as much, but yes, walk-ins are an option after you've done orientation.
And I think that's about it today, Lisa.
Yep, I think that's the end of our questions. Thank you so much for helping out tonight, Shannon.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so if you have any questions about this program or anything else, reach out to us, hcplc.org/contact. That has all of our contact information, including the wonderful Ask a Librarian text or chat option. Call us at 813-273-3652. We're there during normal library business hours. Our schedules, our orientation sessions, anything that you would want to see calendar-wise, hcplc.org/events. And if you want more of our tech topics, you want to look at some past videos and get more information on this program, you're just going to go to hcplc.org/tech topics. So thank you for joining us. We hope to see you next month. We're going to be meeting on February 15th, so the day after Valentine's, and we're going to be doing some 3D printing. So we'll go over all that, give you a good overview of what to expect when you come to our 3D program classes and what kind of gear we have and what you might want to know ahead of time. So we hope to see you for that one. Happy New Year, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Bye.
Bye, friends.